Today we are entering our second phase from symbolic theory to instrumental theory in my language, but others call it from formal theory to substantive theory or operational theory. But usually in classical sociology, we do not jump from symbolic theory to instrumental theory or formal theory to substantive theory, but it is the link between the two. This is the bridge between the two. And usually in classical sociology, we deal this gray area within sociology of knowledge. There are 6 major books, all substantive books dealing with substantive theory, instrumental theory of society, lay suicide, professional groups and civic morals, both by Emile Durkheim, economy and society, and from Max Weber, particularly his 2 lectures known as Science as Vocation and Politics as Vocation. Then from Max Weber we come to Karl Marx, and we are dealing with one book but 2 volumes, Capital Volume 1 and Capital Volume 3. Now first, the sociology of knowledge, or the transition from symbolic theory to instrumental theory. The test case is Emile Durkheim, lay suicide, and in the background of sociology of knowledge of this book, we are dealing with the 2 world wars and sociologist Stalcott Parsons' commentary on classical sociology, known as The Structure of Social Action, Volume 1 and Volume 2. As you know, I come prepared with class notes, which I usually read out, so that even if you do not read any other book, although you should read, my lectures are both theoretical and substantive, because I believe only formal theory is theory, substantive theory is operational theory. Okay, now I am giving my introduction to sociology of knowledge of the book Lay Suicide. For the English-speaking readers of Emile Durkheim's 1897 book, Lay Suicide, this book is set apart from almost all other books of Emile Durkheim. It is perhaps the main reason that it was translated and made available to the English-speaking academic world at last, after all his French books were translated and well received both in Britain and United States. as well as other colonies of Britain, namely India, Pakistan, Australia, Canada, South Africa, etc. Now, as you know, Emile Durkheim had already died in 1917, and in English language, his first book is not The Division of Labor in Society, the first book which he wrote in 1893, nor his second book, The Rules of Sociological Method, nor the third book, Les Suicide, the book which is the test case for today's lecture, nor Primitive Classification, which he wrote with his nephew Marcel Mauss. But the last book which was published in his life, namely The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. Now, the French book was published in 1912, and just 3 years after, in 1915, the English edition of The Elementary Forms of Religious Life came into English-speaking sociological world. Then his other books were published one by one. But this book, the third book, Les Suicide in French and Suicide in English, was not translated at all, not even in parts, until 1951. And let us try to understand sociologically this politics of translation. Unlike the other books of Durkheim, Les Suicide in French, Suicide in English, I am repeating, unlike the other books of Durkheim, Suicide is based on a statistical method. Whereas his other books are either based on secondary sources of ethnographic data, or they were based on comparative method. This book is methodologically set apart or different, qualitatively different, because in this book he followed a statistical method, and the data which Emile Durkheim collected, compiled, compared, and analyzed this data, which contained in this book, did not fit into the British and American canons of Anglo-Saxon paradigm of market capitalism, liberal democracy, utilitarian philosophy, and Calvinist as well as Anglican ethics, which had become the new orthodoxy of the Anglo-American establishment, both in the sense of political economy as well as in the sense of academia. Now, one reason is two world wars. The First World War began in 1914 and ended in 1919. And the Second World War began in 1939 and ended in 1945. Now, in case you read non-partisan history of both world wars, you will be amazed that Imam Durkheim is the only author of classical sociology who wrote on war. I think in 1914, he published a small book, Who Wants War? And in this book, he had analyzed the situation of the world in 1914 when the war had not begun. But as a far-sighted classical sociologist, Imam Durkheim could sense that some people of Western Europe wanted war. And he had sociologically analyzed this phenomena of war which is about to begin. Now, frankly speaking, this book is not in the reckoning of any sociologist anywhere in the world, including me. I have seen the book and I also purchased the book that I found this book very recently. I knew that he had written the book, but it was not available even to me. I have recently got this book, but I'm sorry, I will not be able to share with you people because by the time I finish the syllabus, your semester will end. But I promise you, it will be available on YouTube with my other lectures. And in case you feel like, you can read my lecture on Who Wants War, written by Imam Durkheim. Now let us come to what happened in the two world wars. So far as I know, among the commentators, there is a vague reference in Raymond Aron's writing, but it is not directly discernible in the 2 volumes Main Currents of Sociological Thought. This is available when he is writing about the European philosophy of war. He has got a full book, more fat than this book on war. But he is not dealing with First World War, Second World War, rather he is dealing with philosophy of war. In modern West, and as you know, there is a classical book written by a Chinese philosopher. His name is Sun Tzu, Art of War. There is a comparative perspective which you find in Raymond Aron's commentary on philosophy of war. And there is a vague reference to all this in his 2 volumes on Main Currents of Sociological Thought. Nonetheless, I had already outlined it in my introductory lecture, how when we were students, we used to read Harry Elmer Barnes edited A History of Sociological Thought as the main secondary source. But I told you that when after the Second World War, although America had neither participated in the First World War or the Second World War, but somehow America emerged as the most important economic powerhouse of the non-communist world. And then they started dividing the world into 3 parts. The first world, led by United States of America and NATO countries, which claimed capitalism as the political ideology and liberal democracy as the social structural framework. Then there was the second world, the communist world or the Marxist world or the socialist world, led by USSR and People's Republic of China, but the important countries were Eastern Germany, Eastern European countries, Vietnam, North Korea, Cuba, and then there was a very influential lobby in the freedom movement of India, which was influenced by the revolutionary ideas of Karl Marx. We had the Communist Party of India, founded in 1921. Then we had a socialist bloc in the Indian National Congress, led by I'm not sure this is right or not, but I'm just quoting you how the historians of Indian academia have written about it. The socialist bloc of the Congress party was led by a person called Jawaharlal Nehru, who always claimed that he is a Gandhian until his death. And the Congress establishment still claims that he was a Gandhian. But there is a very influential world opinion which claims that I'm using a term which came by one of you, and it came to me through your teaching assistant, appropriation. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru appropriated Gandhism to further his socialist ideas of Fabian socialism. Now, was Marxist Fabian? Certainly not. Was Karl Marx a Marxist? Certainly not. Then what is Marxism? Marxism is a political economic ideology which was primarily articulated by Karl Marx's friend Friedrich Engels. And the interpretation of Friedrich Engels was implemented in Russia by Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and Joseph Stalin, and it was modified by Chairman Mao. Therefore, although it was Russia under Stalin which had defeated the Axis forces of Germany, Italy, and Japan, but the most important Machiavellian politician of that era was the then Prime Minister of India during the war, Winston Churchill. Now, there is new history of the Second World War, and it is alarming to know that Hitler made at least 3 serious attempts to close the war. But Winston Churchill and Theodore Roosevelt did not allow him to stop the war, Second World War. This is a very controversial new revelation which is based on classified papers of England, correspondence between different people involved in the theatre of war, Second World War. Now, why Winston Churchill did not wanted the war, and why the American establishment and Winston Churchill wanted the Holocaust? You know Holocaust, when millions of Jews were massacred by Nazi Germany of Hitler. The new revelation is that there was a lobby both in United States of America and the United Kingdom which wanted the massacre so that the most enterprising, the most intelligent community of the Jewish diaspora is forced to migrate from Europe to United States. When I read it for the first time, as a Buddhist, I follow the middle path. I was horrified. And even today, I have doubts. But I have no doubt that Emil Durkheim's suicide was not made available into English language because it did not fit with the political ideology of United Kingdom and United States of America. Now, as you know, the state does not intervene in academia directly anywhere in the world, including in India. Therefore, there are agents which are chosen to articulate and elaborate the empire's ideology into academia. During the British rule, it was William Jones and Max Muller who were chosen by the East India Company to canonize Orientalism and Indology in Indian subcontinent as well as in Asia. In the same way, it was Talcott Parsons who was chosen by United Kingdom and United States of America to articulate the new establishment which will emerge after the Second World War. Now, my dear friends, you must remember the publishing date of the structure of social action. In case I remember correctly, I can also check it. I have the syllabus with me. Now, Parsons' book was published in 1937, if I remember correctly. And the Second World War began 2 years after publication of this book. And you will be surprised to know that he deals in 2 volumes with many people who played, according to Parsons, a decisive role in the emergence of sociology as a science of society. But there is no mention of Karl Marx. There is no chapter on him. There is not even a section on Karl Marx. Now, I am not a Marxist. I claim again and again that I am a very, very sincere Buddhist sociologist. My theory, my method and technique, all the 3 are Buddhist. I follow the middle path. I do not take extreme positions. But I did not like the way. And then it was the same establishment which played a politics of not translating laicide until 1951. Now, what is significant about 1951? This is the year Parsons published his second book, The Social System. And now I am reading my prepared text so that you can rely on it for your reference. Even before the publication of Talcott Parsons, the structure of social action in 1937, the popularity of Durkheim's books in United Kingdom was at a peak by 1920s. Since both Bronislaw Malinowski and A.R. Radcliffe Brown came up with ethnographic classics which were rooted in Durkheimian sociology, primarily in his books, The Division of Labor in Society, The Rules of Sociological Method, and the elementary forms of religious life. To make you aware, Bronislaw Malinowski did 12 years participant observation in Troviander Island of Africa, and the book was published in early 1920. The same year, Andaman Islanders of A.R. Radcliffe Brown was published. Now you know Andaman Island is in India, and the first fieldwork of A.R. Radcliffe Brown was in India, in Andaman Island. You should also keep in mind that before these two people came in with their very influential ethnographic works, the Andaman Islander and the Argonauts of Western Pacific, the first book of Emile Durkheim, which contains his first elaboration of how participant observation can be done, or how he did his participant observation. It remains even today the most important guide manual for people doing participant observation of other society or one's own society. You should also keep in mind that the most famous Indian sociologist in the world until now is a person who is not very influential today in India, but the world over. He is equated with Indian sociology for good or bad reasons. His name is Mysore Narasimhan Srinivas, or eminent Srinivas. Now, this man, eminent Srinivas, was a student of G.S. Ghurye, who is regarded as the father of Bombay School of Sociology. He was a student of Sir Patrick Gates, who was commissioned by the English Raj, the British Raj. In 1919, the year 1919 is famous for three important events in Indian history. The first was massacre of Jallianwala Bagh, 1919, where General Dyer, I do not remember his first name at the moment, ordered the massacre of innocent Indians. The majority of them were incidentally from the Sikh community. After this massacre, Rabindranath Tagore, who is known as Gurudev in India, returned his knighthood to the British, although he had supported the British Raj against Swadeshi movement of Bengal in 1906. Therefore, you can understand how heinous, this massacre was, that even a supporter of the English Raj, like Rabindranath Tagore, was forced to return his knighthood, and he became a greater critic of the British Raj and the Anglo-Saxon establishment. Now, the same year, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi entered Indian politics, 1919, and very soon, because of strange circumstances and golden opportunities, he came to represent the Indian freedom movement. He was the most towering personality of the freedom movement from 1919 till his death on 30th January 1948. The third important event of 1919 is the year First World War ended in Europe. But I am not including the First World War as a very important event in Indian history, although Indian army, then known as the British Army, consisted of Indians as well, and they had participated in the First World War. But Indian contribution was much more decisive in Second World War than the First World War. Therefore, I include commissioning of, Sir Patrick Gibbs. He was commissioned to open a new department of sociology with a huge fund from the British Raj in Bombay University. Now, sociology was already a well-established discipline before 1919 in India. It was a very, very serious, object of research and subject of teaching at Kolkata University under the leadership of its Vice Chancellor, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee. And since 1906, that is Swadeshi movement, there was a group of Indians, primarily Bengalis, but also those from other parts of India who are working in Kolkata University as teachers, researchers, and students. The person who is regarded as the founder of Bengal School or Kolkata School of Sociology is B.K. Sarkar, Vinay Kumar Sarkar. And he was ably assisted by a person called B.N. Seal, S-E-A-L. The name of the book of B.K. Sarkar was The Positive Background of Hindu Sociology, and as the name suggests, he was influenced by the father of sociology in France, Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte, the father of Western sociology, wrote his book Positive Philosophy, where he coined the term sociology for the first time in global lexicon of technical terminology. Before positive, philosophy of Auguste Comte, there was no term called sociology in the world, although people like Raymond Aron and his followers include earlier figures like Montesquieu and Voltaire and Tocqueville, who studied democracy in America, although he was a French person, and Edmund Burke, who was a British person who wrote on the French Revolution of 1789, or Thomas Paine, who is regarded as the father of American nation. Now, what I wanted to stress is that in India, since 1906, the study of sociology on a different line, but taking Western contributions of sociology as a reference was developing. Therefore, in the first generation, in 1910 onwards, we have towering people like D.K. Sarkar, Radha Kamal Mukherjee, D.N. Majumdar, and T.P. Mukherjee, and K.C. Chattopadhyay, who are associated with Bengali School or Kolkata School of Sociology. The last person was N.K. Bose, Nirmal Kumar Bose, who is not read much these days, but his student Andre Bete had made him a very important name by translating his Bengali book into English with a long introduction. The book is known as The Structure of Hindu Society, written by Nirmal Kumar Bose in Bengali, but translated by his pupil or Shishya or student Andre Bete, whose father was a French gentleman and whose mother was a Bengali Hindu. Andre Bete, schooling was in Patna, and he combines, good things of Nirmal Kumar Bose, who was the personal assistant of Mahatma Gandhi, or a true Gandhian sociologist, as well as his PhD supervisor, M.N. Srinivas. Now, M.N. Srinivas was a student for the first time of sociology in Bombay University under G.S. Ghuriye, and he is the only sociologist in India who had got 2 PhD on the same subject under 2 different supervisors. Now, I will not say this is something which should be ignored, but this is also interesting that he worked under 2 teachers on the same subject. One teacher was G.S. Ghuriye, as I said his second PhD is on the same subject, religion and society among the Kurks of South India, that is Karnataka at the moment. And the second supervisor was the same person who wrote Andaman Islanders, namely A.R. Radcliffe Brown. But before he died, Srinivas had given a very important insight to us in an interview which is easily available, and I have referred about this in my Hindi book, Bharatiya Samaj Shastra ke Pramukh Sampradaya. Now, what Srinivas says is that although A.R. Radcliffe Brown was his PhD supervisor, but primarily he worked under his assistant. His name was E. Evans Pritchard. Now, Evans Pritchard is regarded as a disciple of A.R. Radcliffe Brown, but in case you read his works, slowly he was taking a different line than A.R. Radcliffe Brown and his orthodox disciples like Mayor Fortes, A.R. Barnes, and many others. On the other hand, this man, Bronisław Malinowski, had or rather had a direct student in India, D.N. Majumdar, who worked under Malinowski and who was a very important figure in Lucknow School of Sociology, led by Radha Kamal Mukherjee, D.P. Mukherjee, A.K. Saran, Baljit Singh. Among these, D.N. Majumdar was odd man out because all the three major masters, Radha Kamal Mukherjee, D.P. Mukherjee, and A.K. Saran, were not influenced at all by any of the European sociologists who are discussed in the commentaries. He was neither influenced by Durkheim nor by Max Weber. Among the three, D.P. Mukherjee was the only person who claimed that he is a Marxiologist. Whenever people called him Marxist, he was furious and in rage he used to abuse people. Therefore, he said that I include in my sociology the concepts of Indology which was developed by my teacher associated with Kolkata School of Sociology, and he was also indebted to William Jones Asiatic Society and some Indologists. Therefore, to understand Indian society, he borrowed the method of Karl Marx. He borrowed the method of Karl Marx, but he did not borrow the theory or the technique of Karl Marx. Therefore, he was a unique person who synthesized, the methodology of Karl Marx and theory of Indology, and he developed his own concepts over the years to understand Indian society, particularly not the social structure, but social element of culture, that is culture. Therefore, a very developed school emerged out of Lucknow School of Sociology, which was rooted in Kolkata School of Sociology. It is known as cultural sociology. The people who led this were students of Lucknow School of Sociology. They were T.K. Unithan, Indra Dev, and Yogendra Singh, the founder of our Center for the Study of Social Systems. Another student of Lucknow School, namely of D.N. Majumdar, was T.N. Madan, who edited contributions to Indian sociology after Louis Dumont and David Pocock left the editorship, and he also shifted the venue of publication from Paris to New Delhi. Now, these both, D.P. Mukherjee, the teacher of Yogendra Singh, and T.N. Madan, the student of D.N. Majumdar, who was a student of Bronisila Malinowski, both played very important role in development of Congress party's cultural, social and academic policies under Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi. D.P. Mukherjee was a close friend of Jawaharlal Nehru, and T.N. Madan worked closely with Indira Gandhi. Now, the third person who influenced Indian states' policy in culture, in academia, during Indira Gandhi years was a person called S.C. Dubey, who is also rooted in the same tradition of participant observation, although he did not claim to be a follower of either Radcliffe Brown or Bronislaw Malinowski, but he claims to be a part of the legacy of Emile Durkheim and Marcel Mauss. Now I am continuing it. I will repeat once more. Even before the publication of Talcott Parsons, The Structure of Social Action in 1937, the popularity of Durkheim in United Kingdom was at a peak by 1920s. And here I forgot to mention one very important person, G.S. Fourier, who succeeded Sir Patrick Gates in Bombay University, and he is regarded with B.K. Sarkar and Radha Kamal Mukherjee as one of the 9 founding fathers of Indian sociology, was a student of W.H.R. Rivers. His classmate was K.C. Chattopadhyay, who joined Kolkata University. Now, the difference between this man, W.H.R. Rivers, and the people of second generation, A.R. Radcliffe Brown and Bronislaw Malinowski, can be understood in these 2 lines. One, unlike Durkheimians and Durkheim himself, who followed some sort of social evolution or evolutionary theory of society, there is evolution from mechanical to organic solidarity, or there is evolution from traditional to modern, society. W.H.R. Rivers believed not in social evolution but diffusion. He followed a theory, rather he articulated a theory. The complementary partner was from United States of America, cultural anthropologist Alfred Kroeber. Both Kroeber and W.H.R. Rivers believed in the theory of diffusion and not in the theory of evolution. Therefore, Durkheim was very popular for some people directly through Radcliffe Brown and Bronislaw Malinowski, but he was also popular because some people like G.S. Fourier and K.C. Chattopadhyay, under the influence of W.H.R. Rivers, criticized the theory of evolution which Durkheimians were supposed to represent in India. Although I do not think Durkheim was a true follower of social evolution like Karl Marx or Auguste Comte, he was, in my opinion, a social realist, followed a middle path, not of Buddhist variety, but of the Jewish variety. But this is a fact that Lee suicide was not read by any Indian sociologist or any British or American sociologist, because it was not available simply in the English language. Now why? The reason I have told you, because the American and British establishment felt very uncomfortable with the data of Lee's suicide, because it punctured their Anglo-Saxon ideology of capitalism and liberal democracy with solid data, which we will deal tomorrow. Now, to be fair to Talcott Parsons, by the time he published his monograph on social system, 1951, he had moved from Max Weber to the new science of cybernetics, but retained the moral consensus and other seminal concepts of Durkheim. Therefore, Parsons in particular and Parsonians in social sciences in general played a very, very important instrumental role in blocking the translation of Lee's suicide into the English language. I think this is self-evident that politics of translation played, not it has played a role only in the case of suicide, it has played a role many, many times in the history of social sciences in modern world. Therefore, we should be aware why a particular text is taught in any country and who benefits out of the teaching and the research of that particular book. I will end here. Thank you.